Arsenal take on Brighton, and the burning question I've got in my mind is: are Arsenal a bit boring? Because I don't feel anything watching them. I feel like I'm watching a Guardiola City team going through the motions, pushing teams out of the way. But I know you disagree, so let's tackle that situation first.
Well, I felt something watching them at the weekend because I watched them beat my team at Villa Park. But I don't think they're boring at all. I think the way Arsenal have evolved over the last few years is fascinating. They've gone from a team that was struggling to qualify for the Champions League to a team that jumped and is then suddenly challenging for the title a couple of seasons in a row. So I think they're just efficient. Arsenal, at the end of the day, the idea of football is to keep the ball out of the net and score goals, and that's simply what Arsenal do.
See, I hear that, but then we spoke about this last season, I think. How the game's becoming mechanical, a bit robotic, and I think Arteta really buys into that. I just bought in Marino, another player above 6 foot, Calafiori above 6 foot. And I was looking at their starting 11, I was thinking, the smallest player in their team is probably Saka. And he's not that small.
He's not that small.
And so I think they've got an idea that if you're more physical, which is a word you love, then you can outpower teams and blow teams over. Yeah. It worked against Wolves. It worked against Villa. I don't think that was an outpower situation, though. And Brighton aren't the biggest team in the world.
Yeah. Do you know what it is? If we live in a clinical kind of footballing world right now, we all long for the days of players that had personalities and players that got you off your feet. But we don't live in that world anymore. And Arteta, he provides personality for his team. He's the guy who's inviting pickpockets round to the training ground to kind of reinforce the message of being aware at all times. And so I can't fault this Arsenal team. As much as I'd love to as a Chelsea fan, they're just doing things the right way. They've progressed in a way that if you're a team like my team, you want to see your team progress like that. 8th, 5th, 2nd. And this is the year that we all believe that they have to win it. But I don't think they're boring. I don't think you can ever get bored of winning. I was birthed or schooled in the era of Jose Mourinho, the 04-05 season where Chelsea were winning a lot of games 1-0 or 2-1. We weren't conceding many goals. And this Arsenal team has showed that they are very, very difficult to beat. They're very difficult to score against. And you guys love their back four in terms of the partnership between Saliba and Gabriel. I think Saliba's one of the best centre-backs in the world. I think that he elevates Gabriel's play. I think if you've got the foundation of a solid back four, you don't concede many goals, you're going to win a lot of games. And Arsenal showed you that against Villa, they got lucky. They rode their luck. Villa should have been 2-0 up at least. But if you can keep clean sheets, you've always got a chance in games. And Arsenal got people who can put the ball in the back of the net. I think they're going to have a very, very good season. And I don't find it boring.
I think it's interesting what you said about, kind of alluding to there not being a star man. Saka's obviously the poster boy. But I think Arsenal are a team. People don't like some of the celebrating and stuff that they do. But, if someone makes a block, if someone clears the ball off the line, the goalkeeper makes a save. They're all in it together. And I think that's been a crucial thing with the progress that Arsenal have made. There's been some opportunistic signings that they've made, and we'll come on and talk about Marino. But over the last few years, 2-3 years, they've brought in a lot of young players who are of a similar age, similar personality, and I think it's been really fascinating to watch that team grow together over the last few seasons and get to this point now. But we all know that the next step for this team has to be trophies.
That's why I think it's really interesting they bought Marino, because from what you said there, like Odegaard, Saka, Martinelli, all these players, actually, they're all sort of blossoming together. But to win the league, they're probably 1%, 2%, 3% out, and so they bring in Calafiori, another defender, into this team, and then they bring in Marino, who's an older player, will bring experience and lots of the tiny details. But he's also said this week himself that he comes into this team and he knows he's one of the most senior players. I find that signing really interesting because I was working out the other day, who moves the needle more, Marino to Arsenal or Gundogan to Man City?
I think Gundogan to Man City, just because we know about the quality of Gundogan. We've seen Marino in the Premier League before and he wasn't amazing at Newcastle. Obviously, he's gone away and has become a more well-rounded player. But Gundogan is the man who captained City to the treble. Gundogan's the man who scored goals in cup finals.
But City won the league, so how much more of the needle do they actually need to push? Is there any needle to go?
I know what you mean in terms of Arsenal need that X factor to push them over the line. I just think this is an Arsenal side that's a team, and I think team is the key word. If you look at their goals this season, it's been goals by committee, 4 different goal scorers: Saka, Havertz, Trossard and Partey. It's not a case of they're relying on one individual. I think that can benefit them, because if someone does go down with an injury or they need to rest players, it's not a case it's going to be a significant drop-off. I think the Marino signing just adds depth to an already strong position for Arsenal. And if they can keep Thomas Partey fit, they've got one of the best midfielders in terms of depth in the league. I really like this Arsenal side. I think that people can point to the fact they need a number 9, they need an X factor, they need a needle pusher. They might need that to really push City all the way. But I think this is an Arsenal team that can win the league by committee, by just relying on all of their individuals. And I foresee a good season for them.
That's the thing, isn't it? I think When were they at their best last season? At the tail end, when you felt that they had that tunnel vision, they were going out there, keeping clean sheets, winning games. But at that point, Thomas Partey was fit again, and they had the option of interchanging Partey and Jorginho, depending on what the game was. You now throw Marino, another different type of midfielder, into the mix. I think Arsenal are going to be able to do that again. And there's so many goals in the team as well. I don't think they really need a striker. I think they will get one at some point, but it will only be when the right one comes up. And at the moment, I don't think the right one for Arsenal's there, and that's why they're not doing anything.
Can I ask you a real quick question, both of you? What's Arsenal's strongest midfield when everyone's fit?
With Marino, I would say Rice is the 6. I don't think Rice is an 8. Ødegaard and Marino.
Yeah, I'd agree. It's difficult to say that when you haven't seen him play for Arsenal yet, but I think they've obviously brought him in for a reason. He's kind of an all-round midfielder who can do a little bit of everything. I think so, in games you might well see Declan Rice and Marino interchange. If Rice marauds forward, Marino's tactically astute enough to drop back in and play that number 6 role and kind of cover the team off. So I think it's a good signing.
I think that's where they'll dominate this game against Brighton, because Brighton obviously played really well against United. I've liked what I've seen from Brighton actually, because weirdly, over the previous few years, even under De Zerbi and Potter, they were really wasteful in the final third. Now they're really clinical, and they still play the good football. And I think it's quite interesting, because they're like the antidote to where Arsenal are actually. As Villa sort of sat back, and you can speak more on that. And I know Arteta said after the game, we didn't expect that game plan. Brighton are not going to sit back. They're going to try and play out. They're going to try and play through Arsenal. And that makes for a very, very interesting game, I think.
Yeah, I think Brighton, I would back Brighton to score in that game, but I would also back them not to keep a clean sheet. They're not the best defensively, although we saw them have a little bit of trouble against Manchester United in a spell in the second half in the game last week. Brighton are just fascinating, because every season they seem to start the season really, really well. I think they've won their first 2 games in the last 3 seasons now.
Good start.
Yeah, 3 different managers as well.
Yeah.
Starting the season.
Keep going.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a stat pack in front of me here, but it doesn't actually. That's not actually in the stat pack. But this will be a tough game. But Arsenal, they can be got at as well. Villa did show that in a spell last week, and again at the start of the second half, where Villa probably should have capitalised and scored. Villa kept going, but they didn't score. Probably more down to themselves rather than anything that Arsenal were doing. So I do think Brighton will cause Arsenal problems. But Arsenal will just always score goals.
It just takes my mind back and think about the turnover there's been at Brighton. I remember De Zerbi's first game as Brighton manager a couple of seasons ago, and Trossard scored a hat-trick against Liverpool. Yeah. And that feels like a lifetime ago. Trossard is now an Arsenal player, probably going to start after his goal against Villa on the weekend. But it's very impressive how they maintained levels and standards despite the turnover of players. And I think they've got a very good chance going to the Emirates and taking on this Arsenal side. Of course, Arsenal behind City are the best team in this league. But this is a Brighton side. They've got so many weapons, and I think he's got that quiet confidence. When you hear him in interviews and you hear him speak about his team, about his players, it's deference. He doesn't ever shine a light on him. He's always highlighting his players, and he's highlighting the system that he's built. And I think this Brighton side have got enough to trouble anybody in the Premier League. And I really like the way they're going, because this preseason, I questioned it. I didn't think that Brighton would be at this level. They spent a lot of money, of course, but I think they've got a good chance going to the Emirates of getting something.
All right, stick your neck on the line then.
Ooh.
Predictions, what are they getting?
Do you know what? I think
he's going to say 4-0 Arsenal.
No, I think it's going to be a 1-1 draw. I think the Brighton will go and get something. I do think so. I think Brighton will go to a lot of these top clubs and get points. We've already seen that this season already. Obviously, it was at home against Manchester United, but this is a very good Brighton side. They've got players that can damage you in all positions of the pitch. So, yeah, 1-1 draw.
2-1 Arsenal. Trossard to get on the score sheet would be my prediction.
I'm going to go 2-1 as well. I think Arsenal have City coming up and they have Tottenham coming up. If they drop points in this one, I just can't see. You know me and narratives. I can't see them dropping points in this one and then the next 2 or one of the next 2. So I'll go 2-1.